You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here with my guy Frank Tucker, representing the Crib, South Florida. And usually we do the Crib or live from the Crib on Wednesdays, but it's been a crazy, busy week. We got information from Miami's barbecue, media day was earlier this week, and all practice started this week for the Miami Hurricanes. So plenty to get into. Of course, we're representing CanesCounty.com. You see that ticker scrolling there on the bottom there. Make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use that promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Also, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms as well, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, Frank, like I said, it's been a very busy week. Starting off with the barbecue, which was a complete success for the Hurricanes. A lot of big names came out and, ate some barbecue and jumped in the pool. And, it was just good vibes overall in Coral Gables. And one of the big names that was out there was Kamarion Franklin, 5-star out of Mississippi, makes his 5th visit to Miami. Also, Marquise Lightfoot made it out there. He's obviously committed to the class, but, definitely a long travel from Chicago. Him and his mom came out there. So definitely good vibes overall at this barbecue. And I think Miami's in a good place to land more 5-stars in this class. Kamarion Franklin being one of them. And also Colin Simmons, who dropped a top 3 this week that indeed included Miami. So just kind of from that momentum, Frank, what chances do you think Miami has to land a Kamarion Franklin or Colin Simmons?
I would be shocked if Kamarion Franklin went anywhere else. I know Tennessee is a school a lot of people like to mention in his recruitment, but he's been to Miami like 5 times all this year, and he continuously comes back. He came back for Legends Camp and did that private workout with the staff. He's been back for every Miami top event. So for me, I think that Miami's in a really good spot in his recruitment moving forward. Jason Taylor has obviously put his best foot forward and letting him know that there's a plan in place for him when he does come to Miami. There was like 20 blue chip kids at the barbecue, which I think is crazy. But there are some guys that came that are blue chip that I think Miami's in a good spot for, like Wayne McCoy, Sion Leilola was there, the JUCO corner, who's one of the top JUCO prospects in the country. But I think that Miami put themselves in a really good spot in 2025. I know we talk about the Kamarion Franklins and those guys, but I think this was an event to really start to get traction with those rising junior prospects. Because if you look at Miami last year and how they went into 2024, they really went behind the 8 ball on a lot of those guys. And that's why we're kind of seeing Miami sit at 17 in the team rankings for this cycle, because they started off really slow. It was Judd Anderson and Dylan Day, and it was a lot of deep evals instead of it being guys that were Josiah Traders and Chance Robinsons. Those guys came a little bit later comparative to coming at the beginning. I know Chance was a lot earlier than JoJo, but still, they didn't start off as hot as they probably could have. So I think a lot of that credit goes to Shannon Dawson, Derek Nicholson. Jamila Dye has gotten a lot of credit for his recruiting efforts as of late. So I love what they did with guys like Kamarion Franklin and Wayne McCoy, as well as recruiting the commits that are still in the class. being able to get Artavius Jones back on campus after he visited FSU is a major thing. But the 2025 guys they got on campus is going to pay huge dividends in the next class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they got a great jump on the 2025 class, including Bryce Fitzgerald. You can, look at an article on that by my guy Frank on CanesCounty.com, and plenty of others. And there's been this narrative that Miami's kind of fallen behind in recruiting and are not able to land some of the blue chip guys that they got in the consistency and what they got them from last year to this year. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think they have a chance to exceed what they did in 2023 in this 2024 class. So they definitely did well. But let's talk a little bit more about this guy, Colin Simmons, man, because he is a guy that I think a lot of people maybe, doubted that Miami had a chance here because, of all of the, I guess, attention that he was given to maybe at Texas and visiting LSU. So I think Miami actually has a good chance here. From what I hear, it's all about the big city for him and proximity or locale of where Miami is going to be big in his recruitment. From what I hear, it has a lot to do with real estate, which is something that he's really interested in, and that is something that Miami has an advantage of when it comes to those other cities that he is considering. Drop the top 3, and August 10th is his decision date. So I think Miami actually has a legitimate shot to land Colin Simmons, which might surprise some people because all the talk about a 5-star was around Kamarion Franklin. But what do you think of the chances of them actually getting the 5-star out of Texas?
I think they're a dark horse. That would be a good way to describe it. Texas and LSU are still the favorites here. It's a little surprising to me that Miami ended up in the top 3. There really was no talk about it for some time. It seemed like Texas A&M, I think they got a visit out of him, was a little bit higher on the list, and it seemed like he wasn't going to be an East Coast kid, but he puts Miami in that final group. And as we've seen with Elias Rudolph, Miami can make late pushes. They didn't, finish the drill with Elias Rudolph. He ended up choosing to go to Michigan, but we saw there was a late decision there. He almost postponed that decision. So I would not be surprised to see Miami make a really strong push here at the end. I know that they got Marquise Lightfoot in the class already, but they want to bring in 2, 3, potentially 4 defensive ends in this class. And I would not be surprised to see them grab a Colin Simmons, still try to grab a Kamarion Franklin, and try to go after, still try to push for a TJ Lindsey, who's still not going to end up here probably, but is a guy that they like heavily. So they're going to keep pushing for top talent at the defensive end spot. I like where they're at with Colin Simmons just because they did make that top 3, and they got a week to make things happen. And recruiting is fluid. So whoever the favorite might be today might not be the favorite tomorrow and might not be the favorite a week from now. So I think Miami's got a shot. You know the meme where they say, "Are you saying there's a chance?" from Dumb and Dumber. Like that's where I see Miami at right now. There is a chance. From everything I heard, he absolutely loved Miami when he came down here. NIL is going to be a factor. We know that as well. So let's see what happens. Those are 3 big time programs in LSU, Texas, and now Miami. And I think it's going to be a fun ride till the very last day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the Jason Taylor factor is real, and the fact that he's the guy that these kids will potentially be learning from is big in their recruitment. And that was big for Marquise Lightfoot. And that's mainly the reason why he chose the Hurricanes. And the fact that Kamarion Franklin and Colin Simmons are considering the Canes as well has a lot to do with JT, the Hall of Famer. So the UN practice actually started this week, and it kind of kicked off with media day, of course. So there was a lot of players and coaches available to the media. And overall, for me, I think the vibe is that there's a significant culture shift. And I think Cristobal has brought in his guys to really help build that culture. And I think Kevin Beard is one of those guys, and Tim Harris as well. Of course, like I alluded to earlier, Jason Taylor is somebody that everybody really kind of gravitates to on that coaching staff. And I think they're really building this program how it should be built with size, speed, and overall just good kids, man. And I did get to speak to some of the players, and a lot of the players are coming back from injury. So you kind of want to see a lot of these players like Jafari Harvey and Leonard Taylor was banged up. James Williams was banged up. And of course, Zion Nelson is recovering as well. And Elijah Arroyo and Trevonte Citizen. And everybody kind of wants to see Trevonte Citizen on the field. And he had a chance to speak with myself, and I'm going to go ahead and play that clip and just share what he thought about his rehab and when he potentially is going to come back.
Can you just talk about where you are in your process as far as rehab is concerned? Do you expect to see the field this year?
Yeah, I expect to see the field, but right now I'm just taking it day by day, slowly. Make sure that I'm 100%, physically and mentally, to make sure that I'm able to my team succeed this year.
Now, when you say you want to get on the field, so it could be a possibility, maybe which game do you think?
Which game? I can't tell you which game. Yeah. I can just let you know that I'll be on the field this year for sure.
Just tell me about the rehab process. Just obviously it was a long process for you, disappointing in last year's training camp. Just give me a sense of how that went and where you are mentally.
Mentally, I feel like I'm fine right now. I'm good. The process was short long. It was ACL, be out for a whole year. But I feel like I learned a lot during the sideline, and that's what I'm grateful for. Things I witnessed and seen probably wouldn't be able to see while you're playing the game. So I was able to just experience being on the field and just watching and learning from the older guys.
Yeah, and
all right, if you want to, of course, see the rest of that video, that's on this YouTube channel. And what I got from him is that he's ready to kind of get back on the field this season. And there were some questions about him coming back this season, and it seems like that is going to happen at some point, whether that be on special teams, which I could definitely see him helping out with, or in garbage time of maybe the Bethune game, which is in a couple of weeks. I could see that happening as well. But I'm excited for not only him, but this entire running back room, which is all of a sudden is deep, Frank. it's got a bunch of guys, and Trevonte Citizen and AJ Allen being the only players that are not from South Florida, but it's loaded with guys from that are just blue chip type of players, with Chris Johnson and Mark Fletcher, and I didn't even talk about the two backs that will probably carry most of the load in Don Chaney and Henry Parrish. So this is a running back room that is now, and I'm excited to see what Trevonte Citizen could potentially do.
Yeah, I have the biggest question for me is, do they burn the opportunity for a medical redshirt to bring him in at the end of the year? Do you do that? You have a deep running back room that you just brought in A.J. Allen. You brought in 2 running backs that are really talented guys, Chris Johnson and Mark Fletcher in the last class. Mark Fletcher is supposed to be a guy that's supposed to come in and compete for the starting job almost immediately. Henry Parrish is a balanced, dependable player. Don Chaney looks finally healthy. Trevonte Citizen kind of seems like the new Don Chaney. And I just don't know if you need him to come back. Do you need him this year? No. You don't really need him this year. So, in my opinion, there should be a push for kind of like another redshirt season. Let him come back fully healthy. Let him be a third-year freshman. He'll have a ton of experience, and you have a bright future ahead of you with Trevonte Citizen competing for the job with A.J. Allen, Chris Johnson, and Mark Fletcher. And I think that's the best route for Miami to take. We'll see if they do that. We did see them bring back Don Chaney at the very end of last season. So I know that Mario loves him, and maybe if he's the best guy on the field, you got to bring him back because you don't keep the best talent on the bench. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens there. And another player coming back from injury is Elijah Arroyo. Potential starter or co-starter with Cam McCormick. But this guy is a game changer, man. He's the most complete tight end on the roster who can block and catch at a high level. He's coming back from injury as well. And we did speak to Coach Cristobal this week, so kind of wanted to play his audio of what he said about Elijah Arroyo.
Put it this way, he's done everything full speed. We just limit the reps until we hit certain, benchmarks for his rehab. Joe Girardi does an unbelievable job with return to play. So he's Elijah. You've seen him before. You know how valuable he is. You know how much it hurt not having him last year. And he's even a better human being. The guy's a great person. He's a great leader. We're fired up to have him back. Coach, as far as
Obviously, Coach Cristobal high on Elijah Arroyo. I am myself. I know you are, Frank. Just the potential of him just being unlocked in this offense.
He's a guy that can play in the slot in this air raid attack. He's a guy that if you needed him as an H-back, he's athletic enough and a good enough blocker to be able to do that. He can be an inline blocker with his hand in the dirt on the line of scrimmage, has that extra offensive tackle. He's a massive player as well. His only problem is staying healthy. If he can come in and stay healthy, Cam McCormick, despite him going into his 13th season in college football, basically, is not going to outplay him. Jaleel Skinner, to me, is more of a big receiver. Elijah Arroyo has the potential to be one of the best tight ends in all of college football. He is what everybody wanted Will Mallory to be. We saw, Will Mallory as a receiver do really well, but he left so much on the bone as a blocker. And Arroyo is that balanced tight end, that modern tight end that can do both. And I think that this staff definitely loves what they see in him. I was not a fan when he first committed. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like,
why not?
We're talking about a Texas kid over Khalil Brantley. Come on. What are we doing? And he proved me wrong all the way through.
But he's originally from here.
He's originally from here, but he's not from here. I was doing the South Florida bias. He was more of a receiver than he was actually a tight end in high school. Actually, I think he was a 1,000-yard guy. He kind of fit that Caleb. He was a bigger version of Caleb Odom in a lot of ways in high school. If you go back and look, he was a freak athlete. I just didn't know if he was going to be a tight end, and he's proven that. He's put on a lot of size. He's shown the ability to develop as a blocker, and I think that he is a major player as long as he's healthy on this offense, because despite having an influx of talent come in at the receiver position, none of it has really proven itself just yet. Colby Young has shown that he has the potential to be an early round draft pick. Jacoby George, we know as South Florida guys, is a really good football player, has to stay non-suspended and healthy. Xavier Strepo, solid, not exceptional. Shamar Kirk is a JUCO kid, right? Everybody who's come in and who's part of that group has a lot of potential. But again, we're always talking about potential, not guys that have a resume to do it just yet. But every time Elijah Arroyo gets the ball in his hands, he's making things happen. I think he had the biggest pass play for a large portion of the season last year, early on before he got hurt. As a tight end, he took like a 10-yard out route, I think, for a massive gain. So the potential is there for him to be a massive target in this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are just an array of playmakers on this team at tight end, wide receiver, and running back. The roster, to me, Frank, is just transformed. I mean, it just looks 5 times better than what it did last season. I think Miami did a great job of trimming the fat and adding some quality guys, quality size guys, and just quality character guys as well. So really excited overall of what we'll see from this team. And we did see some of this team this week at practice, and it was, it's, how it is, Frank. We get like, 50 practice time, and it's just are you hearing the audio on that or no?
I was hearing the audio for a second, and then as soon as you paused it, you were back.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's just been interesting to kind of see as little as we can see.
The beginning of Indy and warm-ups, that's what we
That's
got to see, right?
that's basically all what we got to like film, to be honest. And it's it's like it's good to see because you get to see a lot of players just kind of working out here and doing like individual drills. Kind of get to see the size and speed of some of these players, but it's it's very basic, as far as what you see at practice. And I think some of the players that kind of stood out to me were like a Corey Couch. The fact that he seems like he was running with the ones, and the other cornerback that kind of stood out to me is Jadaeus Richards. He's a guy who got an interception in practice, and he, just looks impressive. He's long, he's lanky. He kind of disrupts passes, uh, you know, at a high level. So, really excited to kind of see his potential and what he can do throughout fall camp. And then it's Damari Brown for me. Damari Brown seems like he's going to challenge for that spot and just really show what he can do as well. I think there's a potential that we might see both Brown brothers on the field at some point, because we all know that Devontae Brown is definitely going to get playing time and is probably in the best position to get that first DB spot. But the second one is really kind of more, I guess, question. It's the question of whether who's gonna be in that second DB spot and who is going to be at nickel as well. I think Jaden Davis has a great chance to be that nickel corner. But there's a lot of changes, a lot of cross training going on, a lot of corners playing safety, a lot of safeties playing linebacker, which we'll get to in a minute. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts, but I think the position group that's the most interesting to watch in this fall camp is cornerback, is the particularly the second cornerback position.
Yeah, I agree with you. Daryl Porter didn't show enough in the spring to just have clamps on that job, no pun intended. But overall, it's a much better room. We were talking about Terry Roberts in the spring, who's not even on the program anymore, right? So now you got Kamarion Brown, who was an elite talent in South Florida out of high school ranks. Jedias Richard has been raved about since he's gotten to Miami. He's a massive player at 6'1", 200 pounds, who could play either cornerback or safety. He has the ability to cross-train and give some depth or potential starter reps at that corner spot, as well as depth availability at that safety spot, which there's not a lot of it. You got Marquise Williams behind James Williams and Cam Kinchens, but that's pretty much it. It's pretty much it. So I love what Miami has at defensive back. The conversation is very similar to receiver, right? There's a lot of potential in that room. Trevonte Brown was a guy who was a star at one point at UCF. Damari Brown has the potential to be an impact freshman, very much like a Francis Mauanoa. Then you got Jedias Richard, who the last few games of 2022 was a rising player for that Vanderbilt team that looked really, really good comparative to years past. So, and then Jaden Davis, haven't even spoke about him. He's got experience. He's one of the older players on the defense, and he fits the mold of what they're looking for when they do have a traditional nickel out there. I am surprised about Corey Couch getting so many reps in practice, especially on the outside. I know his size is a little bit closer to 185 pounds now, but maybe it's better for him that he doesn't have to be in a position to where he has to tackle somebody inside the box, right? On a more maybe he's been talked about as the best cover corner on the team for the last few years at times. So maybe it is the best transition for him to just play as an outside corner for this team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Jaden Davis is just a much better tackler at the line, and I think he fits that nickel corner position a lot better than Corey Couch does. And I was getting the same thing. We've been talking about Couch being the best cover corner on this team for a while, and he to put him out there on the outside, I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on him. But this is his time. This is his time to shine, and I think he's going to take advantage of that. And what it does do is put Daryl Porter in an interesting situation, because if Corey Couch is going to win that job and Daryl Porter, and Jaden Davis is going to win that nickel corner spot, then where does that leave Daryl Porter? I'm not sure if he, has a spot on this team with a Jedias Richard flashing the way that he is. Maybe they play Richard or add safety as well, because he's got that experience. Richard does, and the safety position is a thin one. You do have a James Williams, you do have a Cam Kinchen, but from what we know now, James Williams will be moving to a linebacker spot, and I think that is one of the more interesting kind of storylines coming out this week. And it's something that we've always kind of talked about, Frank, you and I, and me with other people around the program, and, just kind of watching the program as well, that James Williams is kind of a better fit closer to the line of scrimmage. We saw him make plays at the line of scrimmage last season and before that. And we know what he's done in high school. Most of his big plays were at the line of scrimmage, making, breaking on the ball with short passes, or just making a devastating tackle on a quarterback or a running back close to the line of scrimmage. He's a physical guy who wants to make those type of plays. And from what I gathered from his press conference was that he said it himself. He kind of knew this was coming. He kind of knew that this is, where his career was going to go, and that was to the linebacker position. And I do have, a clip of where of what he kind of what he
what he said about it.
What he said about it exactly. Try to do two things at once, man.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I'll just touch on it. Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Obviously playing safety. And Coach Kiki said that he thought that would help you when it came time to go to the NFL. Your thoughts on all that?
I mean, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Whatever Coach Gidry asked me to do, or Coach Dodge, I'm willing to do it. It don't matter what it is. I'm willing to make the team great and help us win.
Do you like your role in the new defense?
I love my role. I'm willing to do it all. I want to move around, be me, be more comfortable.
What's it like playing outside linebacker if you ever get that shot?
I mean, it don't matter what I play. I feel comfortable wherever I go because the confidence I have for myself. So the work I put in, the work ethic, the things I did off field, off season, this off season was a hell of off season. So I'm willing to come to the party.
He's willing to the party.
He's willing to come to the party. So for me, I think people dwell on one word way too much with James Williams, and that's linebacker. He doesn't necessarily have to be playing linebacker, right? Just because he's getting closer to the line of scrimmage doesn't mean he's playing linebacker. It's a 4-2-5 scheme, so he'll be playing like a hybrid role. So he's still going to be playing as a safety. It's just a safety that's closer to the line of scrimmage. It's an overhang player, and that's what fits his game best. Like if you watch his tape at American Heritage, that is the role that he played. And we've spoke about this earlier in the offseason, and people kind of gave us some pushback on it. But this was expected. This was expected that he was going to be a player that was going to be moving around. He was going to be getting closer to the line of scrimmage as that overhang player in this defense. And instead of putting a Corey Couch or a Jaden Davis at that nickel spot at times, it was going to be a player that was like a James Williams. And in the future, that would be a guy like a Caleb Spencer, right? Guys that aren't necessarily linebackers, but aren't necessarily your traditional safeties like a Cam Kinchens or a Marquise Williams. I think this is going to pay huge dividends. Once again, huge dividends, right? The stock is up on James Williams in this defense. He's going to make plays at the line of scrimmage. In the state, if you go back and watch the state playoffs where James Williams was at American Heritage against Miami Northwestern, it was one of the biggest games in the country. Northwestern is still having nightmares about James Williams in that game. He had double-digit tackles, TFLs, was making plays on the ball in the air. Like you said, in breaking short routes, he was able to make plays on because of his length and his short area quickness. Listen, James Williams, as a junior, looked like he could play that free safety type role when he was at Western. But he's constantly gotten bigger. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. It's hard to play that role when you got slot receivers biting at your toes after getting a 25-yard head start on you, right? It's hard for a guy like that to be able to cover a post pattern when it's coming at him head on. So I love what's gonna come of a healthy James Williams this year. I know people want to talk about the tackling, but James Williams has never been a big hitter, but he's always been a sure tackler. And when you're 6'5", 220 pounds, you don't have to do much to get guys on the ground. And if he's able to wrap a guy up instead of just putting his shoulder into him, he's gonna be completely fine. People got to stop putting so much pressure on him to be a big hitter because he's 6'5", 220 pounds. If James Williams plays like James Williams, he is what Cam Kinchen said, a potential All-American.
Yeah. James Williams was second leading tackler on the team last season, right behind All-American Cam Kinchens. And you talked a little high school football, and high school football is about to get going this week, man. As far as like media days is concerned, and then in a couple of weeks we'll have actual games. First one I'm excited about is Northwestern and Chaminade, just to kind of see them on the gridiron and not on 7-on-7 setting, and it is going to be exciting. And then Booker T and American Heritage is a nice game to kind of start things off as well. But before we get into the team stuff, because I did see that you dropped the top 15 that caused, some controversy, which it naturally does. It always does. I was all up in those comments to kind of see what people were saying. And but let's talk about the players, man, because South Florida, obviously, arguably the best talent in the world, Craig. and and Miami is obviously trying to get the best talent, and we're right here in South Florida. Who do you think are the top 3 players in South Florida? I know I can bet the bank I know one player that you're going to say. But who are the top 3 players in South Florida, one? And what are the chances of Miami getting those top 3 guys?
What's crazy is I think all 3 of them play on the same team, and that's at Chaminade Madonna. And that's Jeremiah Smith, Zaquan Patterson, and Josiah Trader. They've been the guys I think have been the top 3 in 2024 since probably the beginning of their sophomore year. And it's pretty easy to see with the resumes that those guys have. Now, on the chances that Miami gets Jeremiah Smith, I think that there's more smoke to it than people like to lead on. Right? People want to look at the Chance Robinson being recruited by Ohio State as Ohio State finally jumping in the Chance Robinson race. I think it's Ohio State being nervous about what is going on with Jeremiah Smith in Miami. Chance Robinson was the first big fish in South Florida to land with Miami. Yeah. That was huge. And we've seen a cascade effect with the rest of that Miami Gardens Ravens Purple Machine group kind of getting interest back with Miami. Josiah Trader ends up in this class because Ryan Mack ends up in the class. Ryan Mack ends up in the class in a lot of ways. Like, Pittsburgh was a real contender in his race, but teammate and former Little League teammate and close friend Chance Robinson was in his ear saying, "Where else are you going to go?" Right? He's been a behind the scenes ambassador for this class, despite people trying to pin him to go into Florida, and now people trying to pin him to go to Ohio State. None of those things are going to happen. They're not. Miami has recruited the family. They've recruited Chance. They've let him know that there's a chance for him to get on the field as soon as he steps on campus. Miami is in a really good spot with Jeremiah Smith. If you win 9 games this year, I think a flip happens. And Zaquan Patterson, I think that they end up with him as well. I have a future cast in since March on Zaquan Patterson to Miami. I've long felt that that's going to be the home for him. Everybody thought Georgia was going to be the spot. That ended up not being the spot. People started talking about FSU. That ended up not being the spot. Now it's looking like a Michigan-Miami race with Auburn as a dark horse. I don't think that Auburn ends up with him. I think Auburn could end up with KJ Bolden, right? And I think that makes it so that he's not as much of a major priority for Auburn, despite them still probably going to be recruiting him. And I think that Michigan and Miami are going to be the schools that are on him the most, right? Those are 2 schools that they need a Zaquan Patterson. because Zaquan could start at either school as a true freshman because he's a 5-star player. He is a 5-star player. He's in the conversation for the best safety in the country, and he's a 6'1", 6'2" freak athlete that can play either side of the ball and has dominated on the high school level. So I love where Miami's at with both those kids, and I know that people are always scared about kids taking other visits. And Josiah Trader came out and it did say that he was still going to take visits during the year. I'm okay with the kid taking visits. It happens.
Yeah.
We can't as Hurricane fans and people in this Hurricane community be okay with other kids from other schools taking visits to Miami despite their commitment. And when it happens to us, we get in our feelings. That Clemson model doesn't work anymore. And that's why we're seeing Clemson not recruit as high of a level as they did before. And so I think Miami's in a good spot with all three kids. And if I had to make a bet in Vegas on the chances that Miami ends up with all three, I would cash out. I would put all my money in there and cash out at the end because I know that I'm going to win that bet. Because I love where Miami's at with Shaman Amadana right now. I love where they're at with that Purple Machine group. And I think that they are doing a really good job of recruiting the likes of Zaquan Patterson, CJ Ewald, on and on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Miami has a really good chance to land all three because of all of the points that you made about the Purple Machine potentially all coming to Miami. Miami currently has the 17th ranked class in the nation, behind North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State in the conference. Third in Florida, with Florida ranked third, Florida State ranked 9th, and Miami ranked 17th, like I mentioned. But there is a lot of room for them to kind of move up in the rankings here because Florida State is sitting at 21 commits, and so is Florida. They're
and they went and got
at 19.
And they went, and Florida State kind of shot their load and went and got their big guys already, right? Florida State got their Charles Lester. Florida got a number of big time prospects in the class already. They have multiple 5-stars. Miami hasn't gotten their biggest fish just yet. If you get a Jeremiah Smith, if you get a Kamarion Franklin, if you're able to land a Colin Simmons, could you imagine what this class looks like? If you're able to flip an Elias Rudolph, Artavius Jones makes a push-up, Cam Pruitt makes a push-up into the 4-star ranks, Chris Wheatley-Humphrey makes a push into the 4-star ranks. You are at double-digit blue-chip kids. That's where Miami's behind the 8-ball right now. They have built a core of evaluations that they love, of guys that were 3-star or lower-ranked players. Miami's got 2 2-stars. That's what's really holding them back right now. Nino Francavilla and Abram Murray are their 2 2-star commits. Usually those are guys that, or if you look at Florida State and Florida, they're going to probably finish out with more 3-stars, and same thing with Florida at the end than Miami will over the last wave of this cycle. Like Miami over the last wave will have a better class in that last wave than those 2 programs because the rest of the targets are blue chip guys. The rest of the guys that they're going after are guys that are 4- and 5-star players. If they are able to close out on the guys that they are closing out on right now, look out for Miami as a potential top 5 class.
Couldn't agree more. We'll see how it all shakes out, and we'll find out in a few weeks how it shakes out with Colin Simmons and also David Stone. We'll find out where he's going in this month as well. So anything you want to talk about as far as your top 15? I know, our channel here, a lot of local kids, players, coaches, fans do, watch this channel and this podcast. Let me just point out the obvious. So you got Chaminade and Central tied at number 1. So first of all, I'm gonna call you out, bro. Like, were you scared to put one up over
No,
the
I
other?
think
Or
I think that
do you
there's
really legitimately think that both of those two teams are tied at the top?
so here's how I break it down. If you break it down position by position, right? Chaminade's got the quarterback advantage. I think it's almost a wash at running back. Central's got 4 Division I running backs, 4 kids in their backfield with Division I offers. Chaminade's got Bullet, and then they got R1
Right.
Jackson, who's a stud. So I think that you could probably give Central an advantage there just because of depth purposes, right? Receiver-wise, I'm giving it to Chaminade. Offensive line-wise, I'm going to give it to Central. You bring back your entire starting unit. Defensive line-wise is a wash to me. And Chaminade Madonna now has Anthony Smith, who was actually at Central. But Central has Armando Blunt, Randy Adarica, T.A. Cunningham. T.K. Cunningham is, I believe, still supposed to be in the fold at Miami Central. But Chaminade also has Zach Crothers, who's a Pittsburgh commit. They got Bryce Stringer, who was a starter last year. They have a nice group. That Brecken Harold is a kid with almost double-digit offers who transferred from Cardinal Gibbons. Dante Simpson is a kid with multiple Division I offers, 2025 defensive tackle that was a starter for them last year. So I think it's a wash on the defensive line. Linebacker-wise, giving it to Miami Central. You got Vincent Shavers. You got Ezekiel Marcelin. You got Lamar Smith and Karan Maycock, who is going to be one of the best 2026 prospects in the country, already holds a Miami offer. He looks like Zaquan Patterson already body-wise, and he's going to be a player that really develops into a blue chip prospect. And then DB-wise, I'm going to give it to Chaminade. You got Chris Ewald, you got Zaquan Patterson, you got Gavin Shepard, who holds an offer to Western Michigan. You got a Keenan Rogers, who was a transfer from Dillard. I like that group. So really, it kind of washes out position-wise. And then coaching staff, Coach Jones, excellent coach, multiple-time state champion. Coach Jubin, his first season as a head coach, goes 15-0, the first time in Miami Central program history. You look at the offense coordinators, 2 guys that have done an incredible job at multiple different spots. Overall, it's a wash to me, man. It is a wash. I don't think if you're choosing sides, you got a preference one way or the other. And I tried to look at it in the most unbiased way possible. Despite being a Broward County guy, despite being a fan of Miami Central and what they do in that program, I didn't want to pick a side. That's really where I was at. And it's a game.
That's where I was getting at. I felt like you just didn't want to pick a side, but I feel like you kind of know who.
I really don't. I promise I don't.
But let me just question this, because you kind of broke down the positions, and it's pretty equal kind of across the board. But what's the most important position in football?
The quarterback position. The quarterback position.
Who has the advantage on that? You've already said it.
Chaminade has.
That's where I would have to say Chaminade has the edge, because I agree with kind of everything else, because this is the ball is going to be in the hands of the quarterback. I mean, you could have all these weapons, but that quarterback is basically kind of dictates just how effective a defense will be. And the coaching staff as well, which I think is a wash with both of those elite coaching staffs. But that's kind of where I would say Chaminade has the advantage, because I think CJ Bailey at this point, from what I know of the quarterbacks of these two teams, I think CJ Bailey is better. At this,
I agree with you, right? But if you look at it from this lens, J.C. Evans is a Division I quarterback who's 6'3", 6'4", over 200 pounds, has run a verified 4.56 40. Laser 4.56 40.
Yeah.
Beckham Kritza is a 4-star prospect who has thrown for 3,000 yards as a freshman. It was like a Max Preps All-American or something along those lines.
Right.
So it's not like they are not good at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm not saying
and
that.
then they got Antonio Smith. Then they got Antonio Smith, who's the homegrown kid who was a little league legend.
Who who I like as well. If you talk about quarterback room, Central has it hands down.
Yes.
But the asterisk, I guess I'm from what I'm saying is from what I've seen, because I've seen Beckham Kritza a little bit 7-on-7. I saw him in the spring, but have I seen him in a game setting? No, I haven't seen it yet. So because I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen JC Evans, also only seen him in 7-on-7 setting this offseason. Since I haven't seen it for myself in a game, because tape is just tape, tape are the highlights, tape are the highlights of your game. I want to see the lowlights as well, and, from what I've seen from Bailey at this point is why I give it to Chaminade. But that could change. If I see Central and I see their quarterback play this season, and I'm like, whoa, this quarterback play as a whole is better than Chaminade's, then maybe I might change. But at this point, I got to give it to the Nod boys.
I think it's going to play out, right? Because at the beginning of the year, these teams play elite matchups very early on. Chaminade plays St. Francis, who's one of the top-ranked teams in the country, and Central plays Bishop Gorman. So depending on how those two teams play in those games, I think will dictate, where they sit in my rankings. St. Thomas, too. If St. Thomas goes out and beats St. John Bosco and Chaminade and Central lose those games, we're talking about St. Thomas as the number one team now. So overall,
who's number 3 on your list here?
Who's number three? So it's going to be interesting. But I wanted to touch on the Kickoff Classics a little bit. You talked about them a little bit. I know that Booker T and Heritage play each other, and that's going to be a very interesting matchup. But Chaminade plays Northwestern, which is a rematch of last year, and if anybody knows anything about Northwestern fans, they are rabid. That's an absolutely rabid fan base that comes for people's throats, and they don't lose to Broward, right? They don't like to lose to Broward County. We've seen them get a little crazy after they lose to Heritage, and we've now seen them get a little crazy after they lose to Chaminade. This is a chance for them to get their get back. It's a chance for Adrian Posse to show that he can be that guy, Leon Strauder, who's going to take that quarterback job. They have some really good young talent. Let's see if they can rise to the occasion. And this is Chaminade's first big test of the year because while it is a young Northwestern team, it's a talented young Northwestern team. So excited for that game. Central versus Vanguard. You got Fred Gaskin, who's a quarterback for Vanguard, and they have a really good team as well. Traditional playoff team, always competing for a state championship, and not necessarily getting over that hump, but always a very good squad. So this is going to be a chance for Central to see. We talked about that quarterback position. Who's going to come out and be that guy? Can JC Evans really rise to the occasion and solidify himself as a Power 5 prospect this year? He's got the size. He's got the speed. We've seen him be accurate in the spring. He was exceptional in that spring game, really made some tight window throws. If he can continue to develop as a passer and really run away with that job, it could be a big year for Central. And then Norland versus Blanche Ely. This is another local matchup that I'm excited for. Ely was a team that went undefeated through the regular season and only lost to St. Thomas Aquinas in the playoffs last year. Norland has a ton of expectations. They're led, you just said quarterback is the most important position on the field. Enyo Yapor, the future Dade County all-time leading passer, is leading that charge of a loaded Norland squad that has a Division I kid at almost every single spot on the field. So excited for that game. Those are 4 games that I think are going to really make that week really exciting because the next week we got the Broward versus the USA matchups, and it's a fun early slate of games for South Florida, and there's the rankings. And if you guys go look at the comments, I'm sure it's going to be a fun read for you guys on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
But just kind of run through this. Homestead is a team that I think is a dark horse to beat St. Thomas this year in that 3M state championship. Norland just touched on them. There's a lot of hype there. Booker T, underrated. Max Edwards, the former Miami Northwestern coach, is now the defensive coordinator there, reunited with Coach Ice Harris, loaded defensive backfield, and they've added some skill position talent. Heritage, can they overcome being young? That's going to be the big thing. Western, that's my home, so everybody's going to complain about where they're at. I'm very high on Western this year. They're my favorite to win the 4M state championship.
I think they're too high, but okay.
I get it, but they are a loaded squad this year. They've added a lot of talent. Offensive line is going to be measuring out. It's going to be averaging out at about 300 pounds. So they got a better trenches than they've ever had. They got a Power 5 quarterback commit, Power 5 running back commit, a 4-star receiver, a rising sophomore tight end receiver who's at 12 offers. They have 2 top 25 outside linebackers in the 2025 class. Added another kid with basically double-digit offers from St. Thomas Aquinas and Martin Ryan. I love what Western did this offseason. I think that they have a really good coaching staff, made some really good coaching additions, and I think that they're going to be that favorite. Columbus, obviously, the team you got to knock off. I got them at 9. Gibbons.
So before you go any further, man, that's the one team for me that feels like it's low. Columbus at 9 just feels like it's low because you got a quarterback in Alberto Mendoza, who I think is one of the more underrated quarterbacks. I think
in the cycle, really, yeah.
Yeah, in the cycle. So I don't know. It just seems like they are a bit low for them to be a state champion. And multiple state champion in the last few years, for them to be ranked 9th, kind of just over Gibbons, and sandwiched between Gibbons and a Western. Like I think that's kind of the big one that kind of jumps out to me, like Columbus at 9.
Yeah, so they graduated their entire offensive line, didn't bring in any offensive line transfers. It's a big thing for me. Columbus is known for their offensive line development. They have one of the best offensive line coaches in the country in Coach Hill. So I got to give them credit there, but I just don't know if they're going to have the size to stack up with the best teams in the classification. And I think that they could struggle there. Running back-wise, their Seth Irvin is not there anymore. Yes, they have one of the younger bandies who's playing running back, but I think he's got to prove that he can handle the load as the lead guy before we kind of stamp him. Receiver-wise, we know Jose Leon is elite, but they did lose their other 2. They lost their number 2 and number 3 receiver via transfer this offseason. And I know you bring in Bryce Fitzgerald, but if he's playing both ways, his impact can't be the same as those 2 guys on offense all the time. So I think there are questions on offense. And then defensively, you lose TJ Capers to early graduation. I think that the defensive line is still really good with Dylan Russell. You got Robert Williams, who's an FIU commit. You got Dylan Stevenson, a Stanford commit. I want to see him make a jump this year. We think he didn't show us that he was a borderline 5-star prospect all the time last year. There were definitely flashes, but I'd love to see a little bit more consistent. Linebacker-wise, Hector Chavez, I think if he's 6'1", is probably the number 1 linebacker in the entire class. But outside of that, who's going to step up at linebacker? Because you lose TJ Capers. Is Willis McGahee going to be able to play as a true off-ball linebacker? That's going to be the big question. We've never seen him do it before. He's been a pass rusher the entirety of his high school career, and I know size-wise it's probably a better fit for him to be playing as an off-ball linebacker, and I know he's committed to Nebraska. He's a very good player. We have a lot of love for Willis McGahee, but is he going to be able to do that at a consistent level? Because we've seen guys try to make that transition to be playing an off-ball linebacker. Thomas Davis, who came to Miami, is a really good example of that, and it didn't work out. And then defensive back-wise, I know like I said, you add Bryce Fitzgerald. Jansen Wallace is a solid player. You got Jeff Bandy, who is an Ivy League FCS type player, but it's not star-studded by any stretch of the imagination. You graduate your best safety. Who's going to step up at that spot? So one thing I am going to give him credit on, Coach Dunn is one of the best high school coaches in the country. He probably shouldn't even be coaching high school football. He's a college coach. He has proven to be an elite coach. He's given Columbus their first state championship and maybe ever, right? I don't know if it was their first state championship ever or their first in a long time, but he's proven to be a winner, and I absolutely
It was
have
their first
the
state championship
utmost
ever.
respect. Yeah, so I have the utmost respect for Columbus and that coaching staff. They do an excellent job. I think the trenches worry me a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. Who's going to step up outside of Jose Leon, skill position wise, and who's going to step up in that defensive backfield? Because there's a lot of talent in that 4M classification now, and it's not as clear cut as it used to be.
All right, well, we'll see. I mean, if it was for me, I'd probably put Columbus like around 6, because I'm big on the quarterback and overall talent, and love EJ Yapor, love Townsend at Homestead. So maybe I put those teams in front of a Columbus, but yeah, I'd probably put Columbus maybe around 6, just because of the coaching staff and just what they've been able to do these past 5 years. So
Yep.
But yeah.
So yeah. So listen,
hey, I wanted to ask you, what is 1259?
So 1259 is the name of a podcast I do on Instagram every Tuesday, or during the season we'll do it every Tuesday. But right now we're going every other week. It's with Robert Ortega, who's a coach at Western, and Juwan Dowse, who's a coach now at IMG Academy. And the 1259 is basically the 305 plus the 954. So it's a combination of that. So we talked Dayton Broward County high school football. So we're combining both of those. That's the name that we came up with. I think it's kind of creative. It gives you a little bit of a backstory. People have to ask about it. So
yeah,
it's a fun thing we do on Instagram Live every Tuesday. So check that out. And yeah.
All right. So that is pretty much gonna wrap things up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Went a little long this time, but there was a lot to really cover with the barbecue and media day and first week of practice and Frank's top 15 list. We'll see how that shakes out once the games are being played on.
I'll be wrong. Hey, there's 100% chance I'm going to be wrong. There is no ranking in the country that starts off the year and finishes the year 100% right. There's just no way it's possible. So I'm going to be wrong, and it's kind of part of the territory, right? But it's a fun conversation starter for the beginning of the high school football season.
Absolutely. A lot of more content and exclusive information coming up on CanesCounty.com this week and in the upcoming week. So we've got a media day coming up on Saturday, Hotbed Media Day. So we will be talking to a lot of kids and getting some interviews, of course, and you'll be able to find all of that information on CanesCounty.com. So that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Until the next episode.